Again, we're gonna try and wrap up, but hello, 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 hello. Grace, peace. Yeah, 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 yeah. Hello. All right. John Bragg. I was just making sure it works. What'd you say, Van?
You decided somewhere between Friday and this morning that you needed backup, and so brought John with you.
John. John.
No, okay, go out to lunch.
What's that?
Instead of just being you and your history, you're
Oh,
gonna do.
I'm bringing Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I thought you said John, and I was trying to figure out who John was. Sean, absolutely, yes.
Okay, that's all right.
I assume we'll see that throughout the day. It's just bad for us. Like losing an hour. Terrible. Well, so hospital visits go up, heart attacks go up, strokes go up, drowsy driving accidents go up. Like literally, all of these metrics get worse right after daylight saving, total US. And then in the fall, when we gain an hour of sleep, all those metrics get better. They all go down. So like it's really clear taking away an hour of sleep is physiologically and sociologically bad for us, but we still do it.
Just make a West Coast to East Coast flight and see what happens.
Oh no, it's terrible.
2 or 3
Yeah.
days. I mean, it is.
Jim, good to see you. Oh. I don't think you have to. No.
Okay.
I'll do that.
People are
It's that kind of day. Yeah,
no,
yeah,
it's just cold and
yeah,
dark.
yeah. And we're all lost an hour of sleep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So I'm gonna just leave it up to you.
Okay.
You start when you want.
I'll probably give people like 2 or 3 more minutes. Okay. Somebody did. I don't know who, but
I didn't know what to do. I was sitting there.
yeah. Well, George had it on, and I mean, it was all good. Well, good morning to folks. I know that this feels like 8:45 for your bodies. You don't want to hear my long screed about why it's so bad for us to lose an hour of sleep every year. But I'm just grateful that you have arisen, that you're here for this Covenections class. As Covenant and Connections meet together, it's always good to be connected across some of these silos we have in large churches. Today, it is because of my poor scheduling, so thank you to Connections for being willing to come across the street, and for Covenant and being willing to welcome folks. Before turning to our conversation for today about what a friend we have in Jesus, do I have a friend in you? That's the title. I thought I would do a little bit of Name That Tune. So you've already heard 2 songs about friendship, and so I'm just going to play the beginning of a couple songs and tell me if you recognize the song. They'll all have something to do with friends or reference friends. Somebody? Yeah, welcome back, Cotter. All right, so here we go. All right, this one should be a little easier. Benton Bragg's got it. Get by with a little help from my friends by the Beatles. Here we go. Alice, we just nailed it. Thank you for being a friend by Andrew Gold. And this is one that, well, everybody of a certain age should know. So here we go. Yeah, it's a theme song from Friends. I have a playlist of about 25 songs that either reference or deal with friendship, and I will send out that playlist to folks following this particular class so you can be reminded of the muse that friendship is for many. I've kind of been on a little bit of an interest and journey when it comes to community and friendship for a couple of years now, and it wasn't just because of COVID. And some of it is not new. You all will have heard some of the things that I'm going to share today. But just as a backdrop for us as Americans, Robert referenced in a sermon a month or 2 ago, Robert Putnam's work. A lot of us know the book from the 90s, Bowling Alone, and the recent documentary, Join or Die. in which Robert Putnam, who's a sociologist, documents the decline in what we might see as some of the more obvious signs of community and gathering. Some of those signs are from the 1970s to 90s, there was a 40% decline in the number of Americans who attended even one public meeting on town or school affairs in the previous year. That same period, 70s to the 90s, 60% decline in the amount of picnics that Americans attended annually. A 50% decline in the number of Americans who attended a club during that time. A 35% decline from the 1960s to the 2020s in people who are members of congregations. And then over the last 2 decades, this is a newer stat, over the last 2 decades, we have seen a decline to where only about 2 out of every 10 Americans attends worship on a regular basis. Worship's not the only marker of what it means to be connected to community and gather, but those numbers tell a pretty stark story. Americans aren't connecting to one another, at least in more obvious public settings, in ways that they did prior to the 1960s and 70s. And we have that backdrop in which we are reminded in Genesis 1 that God created us in God's image. And when God says he's going to create, God says, let us create humankind in our image. That's a plural. We are made in the image of God, who is community. 3 in 1, 1 in 3, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so if we're made in the image of that God, it's not a literal physical image, but certainly some folks would suggest it is a theological and a psychological and physiological image in the sense that we are made for community. And we even get that sense in Genesis 2, which is the other creation story, where God says it's not good for man to be alone. Let us make a woman, a helpmate, a partner. So we have this theology of being made for community in the image of God who is community. And there's a growing body of research that shows that we are, in fact, hardwired for connection. You find it in the work of folks like UCLA professor Matthew Lieberman. His first book was Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. And he says, being socially connected is our brain's lifelong passion. It's been baked into our operating system for tens of millions of years. Another book called Why God Changes Your Brain. It's written in tandem by a University of Pennsylvania neuroscientist, and a theologian at UPenn. And they wrote a book called How God Changes Your Brain. And they weren't necessarily literally suggesting that God changes your brain, but they were talking about the ways that being part of religion that's not fear-based, and religion that's not stoking anger and acrimony, but religion that is more wholesome and we would say more holy. In their work on religion, those that neuroscientist and that theologian talk about the ways that engagement with others is literally good for your brain. For instance, smiling is actually a powerful tool for your brain to continue to be healthy. Discussing important topics, engaging with people in healthy and wholesome ways is good for your brain. Meditation, or we would call it prayer, is good for your brain. The gift of hope is good for your brain physiologically. All of those are part of the goods, so to speak, of religion, what it means to gather with other people of faith. I always like to remind people that one of the other things that's good for your brain is yawning. So when you yawn during my sermon, that's my gift to you, right? It's good for your brain. It's healthy. It's wholesome for your brain. And so when we think about this being made in God's image and a God who is community and us being hardwired for community, and then we take a look at the scriptures, we do find examples of friendships. We don't always use that word friend as a lens to study Scripture, but Scripture's got some fascinating friendships. Ruth and Naomi, a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. A daughter-in-law who, for no reason, in terms of her society, she should stay in her homeland, go back to her own people, but for the sake of a love and a friendship, goes with her mother-in-law to what is a foreign land for Ruth, to be there for and with her mother-in-law. There's a deep intergenerational friendship between Ruth and Naomi in the book of Ruth. We certainly would talk about David and Jonathan, who, despite some things I'm going to tell you a little bit later, seem to have a friendship that started
when they first encountered each other. Jonathan is the son of King Saul, who eventually wants to kill David. And the friendship of Jonathan and Saul is so deep that Jonathan risks not only his throne in disobeying his father in order to save David from his father, Jonathan risks his own life to save David from King Saul. This is a deep friendship that we have in Scripture. Certainly in the New Testament, we have people like Paul and Barnabas, who sadly, their friendship ends in a broken state. For a variety of reasons, they part ways. But before that, Paul and Barnabas clearly are the deepest of friends in faith. And there's one other friendship that I think some folks don't always remember, and it's in the Gospel of John. There's an interesting phrase throughout that gospel where there's a particular one of the 12. Sometimes people believe it's the person whose eyewitness accounts form the Gospel of John, so we'll call that person John. There are multiple times in the gospel where we're told about, quote, the disciple whom Jesus loved. There is one of the 12 whose relationship with Jesus seems to be qualitatively different than the other 11, and we call him John. And I think in other circles, we would say that that seems to be a particularly close friendship that Jesus has with John that's different than with the other 11. So when we think about friendships, some of you are aware of a Harvard study on happiness. It's the longest running study on happiness that we have. It began in 1938 with 260 Harvard sophomores, and it's continued on. Some of them have died. They've added more people, some including folks who were from the inner city of Boston, not just Harvard students. And it's studied and traced their development physiologically, emotionally since 1938. There was a book put out not too long ago called The Good Life. It was written by the lead researcher, and we could say the caretaker who's received this from the person who had received the study from the person before them. And the book is called The Good Life. You can find a variety of podcasts with Robert Waldinger, who's the lead researcher. And one of the things that he has a few things that he says about relationships and why they matter. He is a psychiatrist at Massachusetts General Hospital, by the way. He says, the surprising finding is that our relationships and how happy we are in our relationships, they have a powerful influence on our health. Taking care of your body is important, but tending to your relationships is a form of self-care too. And we hear these kinds of things about the importance of relationships. Close relationships, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy throughout their lives, the study revealed. Those ties protect people from life's discontents, help to delay mental and physical decline. They are better predictors of long and happy lives than social class, IQ, or even genes. That finding proved true across the board among both the Harvard men and the inner city participants. And here's a direct quote from Waldinger. It's from a really popular TED Talk he did a few years ago. When we gathered together everything we knew about them at age 50, it wasn't their middle-age cholesterol levels that predicted how they were going to grow old. It was how satisfied they were with their relationships. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. Our relationships matter, not just emotionally, but physiologically. And we know there are different kinds of friendships out there. There are some that we'll call the virtuous ones, that it's not done for any sort of exchange of goods or favors. But there are utilitarian friendships, the kind that exist in part because we're standing on the sideline watching our kids play soccer together. And we're huddled from the rain and the cold while we're watching the flag football. And so we get to know the people next to us. They're the folks that we get to know through certain kinds of pleasure activities, the people we might go on trips with and get to know them because of that. There are also, of course, in this day and age, questions about virtual friendships. Do they have the same impact as in-person friendships? I was talking this week to Catherine Bagwell, who is a professor of psychology at Davidson College. Her focus is on friendship, and particularly adolescent friendship. And she said, number one, virtual friendship should not be entirely dismissed. There are some children and youth in particular who, for a variety of reasons, feel on the edges of groups at school, Might be because of their sense of sexuality or gender or whatever, their social class, and they find connections online that they do not get in the schools or the groups in which they run. And that matters immensely for those kids who are on the edges. So Catherine says we shouldn't just knock virtual friendships. And yet, she also talks about one of her favorite studies that involves daily diaries, where folks are asked through an app on their phone to answer at random times during the day, what are you doing, how are you feeling, and are you with a good friend? And one of the things, and they would do swabs of their saliva. And one of the things that they would find out is that the kids who were with close friends, their saliva revealed that there were chemical changes that were part of decreasing their fear, decreasing their anxiety, and responding more healthfully to whatever the situation was than if they weren't in the presence of a close friend. Like, close friends are prophylactic in terms of defending from and responding to some of the things that happen to us in life. One of these, again, Catherine calls it one of her favorite studies, these daily diaries, the literal changes in our body chemistry brought on by the company of good friends. When Catherine and I were talking with Sean Samuelson Henry, I said, look, are there some things I shouldn't say? Are there some myths that I shouldn't propagate? And she said, one of the great myths is that men don't have close, intimate relationships, that we don't need them in the same way that women need them. And she said, that is a myth. Sometimes our friendships and the intimacy look different than for women, but men still need and respond to close friendships and intimacy in those relationships. When it comes to friendships, maybe all have heard these numbers. Some folks suggest that we can, comfortably hold about 150 friends in total in our lives. I don't know what to make of my 1,200 Facebook friends, but that's okay. But really, we can hold about 15 close friends, some research suggests. But Catherine would also say when it comes to a reciprocal close relationship, the number that's most important is the number 1. That when we get that one reciprocal close friend, I don't know the exact yardage, but we go somewhere from about the 0-yard line to beyond the 50 with that one friend. So we don't have to have the full 15. We don't need the 1,200. Having that one close friend is extremely important. But when it comes to friends, the 2021 American Time Use Survey, it's something done by the Census Bureau, it found that Americans spend only 2 hours and 45 minutes a week with our friends. 2 hours, 45 minutes. A decade ago, so that would have been 2011, Americans were spending twice as much time with their friends. Now, we all know about ages and stages in life. Sean and I certainly aren't naive, having busy children ourselves. And some people might think that's probably an effect of COVID, but get this. People decreased their time with friends more from 2014 to 2019 than the decline that happened as a result of COVID and after. We were already spending less time with friends before COVID. COVID just continued what we were already doing as Americans. There was also another researcher with Gallup, when they were doing a survey about workplace environments, there's actually an interesting question they ask. And the question is, do you have a best friend at work? And the researcher said, sometimes people aren't sure what to make of that question. Why would I ask that question? Now, from their end, he said, I asked the question because of production. The research has repeatedly shown that having a best friend at work, people produce more and produce better work. They're more fulfilled, they're more satisfied, they're more likely to want to be there and to show up because they've got a best friend. Now, that's a research question from someone who's interested in the economics of the workplace, but I wonder what it would be like to substitute the word church for work. Do you have a best friend at church? A place where our productivity isn't about churning out something, but it's about the kinds of relationships we're called to have and the kind of love we're allowed to share with the world, and whether the friendships, if we have them here, enable us to be those disciples and servants that we are called to be, satisfied, desirous to be here, to want to be with one another. Do you have a close or best friend at church? Now, when we think about that, I do want to mention another set of numbers, which is this. So some of you all probably watched Seinfeld back in the day. And there's one particular scene where early on in Seinfeld, they would have little bits of Jerry's stand-up routine, and then they would tell more of the episode for that day, and then they have a little bit more of a stand-up routine. And part of his stand-up routine one time was about how easy it was for kids to make friends. You like blue? I like blue. We're best friends, right? Let's jump up and down on the bed. I love jumping on the bed too. I mean, so instant best friends, which there are some people who can be good friends right away. But here are some numbers to think about for a minute. One researcher suggests that to move from being an acquaintance to a friend takes 45 hours together. And to move to being a good friend takes another 50. And to being a close personal friend takes another 100. So if you do the math, that's 200 hours together to move from being an acquaintance to being a close personal friend. Who has 200 hours? Right? But once upon a time, we found time to make those friendships or to deepen the relationships that we have. I'm always, when I think back about that number about having 15 friends and how long it takes, Sean and I, when we were in Grosse Pointe, when we first moved there and had our really young children, our daughter's from China, and so we would go up to a Chinese Christian Alliance church. These were folks from Taiwan, and these immigrants from Taiwan had found that their grandchildren weren't learning Chinese. Their children, some of whom were born in Taiwan, others born in the United States, weren't teaching the grandchildren Chinese. And so the folks there had Chinese classes every Saturday, and they found that seeking to teach their own grandchildren was an opportunity for those of us with daughters or children from China to kind of ride the coattails. So we would go up every Saturday up to a community about 45-minute drive from Grosse Pointe. And one time Sean was talking to a fellow parent, and the parent asked, well, where are y'all from? And Sean said, oh, we're from Grosse Pointe. She goes, oh, Grosse Pointe. And of course, there's a story when someone kind of does the, Davidson. Grosse Pointe. And Sean said, oh, well, you know Grosse Pointe? She goes, well, we first lived in Grosse Pointe when we moved there. And there was a group of women that I was getting to know. And I felt like things were going really well. And at some point, at a gathering, they looked at me and they said, we like you. We just don't have room for another friend. We don't have the time. We don't have the bandwidth. So good luck, and won't see you after tonight. So they moved away from Grosse Pointe because the message was we don't make room for new people in our lives in this particular group. It's an extreme story, of course, but there are a variety of ways in which we tell people, new to churches, new to schools, new to communities, you're welcome to be here, but not with us. We've got all that we can handle these days. So I'm always fascinated by those kinds of stories, by some of those numbers. I want to pause for a minute before making a little bit of a pivot, and that's just briefly to talk about men. Because according to a lot of researchers, this decline in friendship and this decline in the amount of time that people spend together, it has not hit Americans equally. Men appear to have suffered a greater decline in friendship over the last 30 years than women. So I know I've thrown out a lot of numbers to you, but here are a couple more to think about. 30 years ago, a majority of men, 55%, reported having at least 6 close friends. Today, that number has been cut in half. Slightly more than 1 in 4 may have 6 or more close friends. 15% of men have no close friendships at all, and that is a 5-fold increase from 1990. Men are pulling away, even from friendships of a lifetime, at a higher rate than women. And it's not a break over politics. It's not over social issues. Men are just literally stopping, calling their friends, texting their friends, getting together with their friends. It's a higher rate of decline for men than it is for women. I don't posit an answer, but I throw it out to you. And for those of us who are parents, And Sean and I have thought about this a little bit. What do we model for our kids when we know about the role and impact that friends have on us physiologically, emotionally, when we know that we're theologically made for this, when our children don't see us spending time with friends, and for the fathers in the room, don't see their fathers spending time with male friends or other friends, what are we communicating? And to what impact, I would ask. So here's the pivot that I want to make for a moment. I've given you a few things sociologically, theologically, physiologically. Catherine Bagwell, that psychology professor at Davidson, in one of her classes on adolescent friendship, invited a local author named Sean Samuelson Henry to come to the class. And so Sean Henry has come to this class as well. And for those who don't know, Sean Samuelson Henry is married to me. So come on up, Sean. In Sean's book, Made in Maine, she actually has several sets of friendships that are part of the foci of Catherine's conversation with her psychology students at Davidson. So I wanted to give Sean a couple minutes to talk about those friendships because I think they're illustrative of either a couple of things that I've either spoken to or teased out or that I'm actually going to spell out a little bit more in a couple of minutes.
Okay, Thank you. One of the, can you hear me? Okay. One of the friendships in Made in Maine happens around, happens in a community of knitters, and they happen to be all women, but they are multi-generational because the mill has closed and all the young women who were working at the mill now have this spare time. And that is, it's a community where people are producing something, but really it's a community of togetherness. And there's a woman in a wheelchair who always provides she pours the coffee, and there's a woman who's the expert who's dyslexic, and she helps people with their patterns. She can't read very well, but she knows her yarn. So that is an example of a friendship, a group of friendship, a friendship group in my novel. The other kind of friendship that Peter did not reference was platonic friendship between, right, for this sake, we'll just have a binary example of male and female. And that is something that I really celebrate in both Made in Maine and then my next novel, because I think it's super powerful. And it's something that I didn't have as a young person. I had lots of girlfriends. I didn't have male friends. The boys were for dating, not for friendship. And I look at our children, and you probably are far more enlightened than I was, but I look at our children and they have multiple friends, and it doesn't matter their gender. And it's not always ooh, I saw Facebook pictures of your son with all these girls. And it's not like, wow, yeah, he has a lot of girlfriends, but he has a lot of female friends. I am going to read just two excerpts, one from my new novel. I feel like a musician, like, I don't want to play the old traditional songs. This is my new track. But it is sort of a negative view of friendship. And Peter, I feel like, was focusing on the positive. But when you don't have those friends, or you think you have a friend group and it's not actually what they think, that's incredibly hard and hurtful. So Melanie is the best friend of our protagonist. This is in my new novel called Trampled. And the protagonist is a 17-year-old girl named Vine. So I'm just going to leap right in. I ignore Melanie's calls at work. She calls again just as I am entering the apartment. This time I answer, "Hey, Melanie, what was that today?" I fall to the couch wearily. What was what? Oh my God, don't play all innocent. Why were you so rude to us? We were only trying to help you. How is telling me who I can hang out with helping me? You totally broke the code. You don't go after someone you know your friends like. Tyr and I are friends, Mel. That's all. It doesn't matter, it's the principle. And every minute he spends with you and the geeks and the weight room guys and the soccer team and, you know, those weirdos, is time that Britt and Addison don't get with him. Don't you get that? I don't say anything. And you're not holding up your side of the friendship. With us, I mean. We take you cool places, drive you around, and raise your social status. And you know, you help us with our work. What? So our friendship is really a transaction? Would you relax? That's not a bad thing, Vine. I mean, think about it. All relationships are transactional. Addison and I were talking about this today. People wouldn't be friends or partners or spouses if they didn't get something out of the relationship, whether it's sex or money or security or entertainment or whatever. I guess I thought friendships happened organically, I say coldly. People hanging out together because they like each other, support each other, like I'm not weighing what I get out of it. Well, maybe it's time to grow up a little, Melanie says, because that's life. Take our friendship. We've been besties forever, obviously, because we like each other and support each other. I've given you so much more than you would ever have gotten from your mother, you know, because I have the means. And you help me with my work, and you come to my meets, and you're fun to be with. Oh, and you make baked goods from scratch. Speaking of which, she laughs, it's time for me to choose my cake. I assume you haven't forgotten. Melanie's birthday is in 2 days. When I was 10, I baked a cake for her. It's become a tradition. She gets to pick any kind of birthday cake, and I'll happily concoct it. But how can she so easily slip into this lightness, this intimate familiarity, after quantifying our friendship? Do you really see friendships like that? You know, like a balance sheet? Oh my God, Vine, it's so not a big deal. Of course I do. And if you were honest, you would too. Can we please move on? I'd rather think about my birthday cake. Fine, Melody, I sigh. What would you like? Oh my goodness, I thought you'd never ask, she jokes. Okay, I've narrowed it down to 3. 1, German chocolate. 2, carrot cake with cream cheese frosting. 3, raspberry meringue. She thinks for a while. I think I'm gonna go with carrot cake. It's supposed to be frigid, and I'm going long with Chase, probably 11 or 12 miles, so I'll need something heavier to replace the calories. Bring it over in the afternoon, and we can hang out, do our nails. Oh, and you can look at my research paper for APUSH. Yeah, okay, see you then. Fine, you're not still mad, right? I'm fine, Melanie, I lie. Okay, love you. All right, so that's sort of the negative side. And then just really quickly, do I have time for this? Yeah. Okay, really quickly, okay. Okay, and yeah, give me the, this is from Made in Maine, and this is just an example of the guy's friendship. And when Whittier read Made in Maine, he
Whittier is
really,
our youngest son.
Sorry, a 17-year-old, same as these guys. He really identified with the guys, and for Luna, the protagonist, who really hasn't had friendships in her life, this is all new. And this is well on into the book when she has established this tentative new friendship. Every day at lunch now, Coop and Hunter have asked me and Kiki to sit at their table with most of the basketball team. The only reason I agree is that I've promised Temmie I would stop hiding, and it's entertaining. Today, Nate holds up a package of Doritos. Up for grabs, he calls out. 3 guys say, mine, at the same time. Okay, says Nate, whoever can tell me the first 3 ingredients gets them. Coop, you start. Corn and oil and salt. Close, you got the first 2. Josh? Wait, that's not fair. I did their heavy lifting, Coop protests. They're just riding my coattails. If you'd gotten it right, you wouldn't think it was unfair, so shut up. Josh, go. Corn, oil, and spices. Spices? That's way too vague. Am I right? No, you're not right. Justin, you're up. I got this. Corn, oil, and cheese. Nope, nobody wins. The third ingredient is maltodextrin. Nate rips open the bag and pulls out a chip. He closes his eyes and bites into it like he's in rapture. Who the hell was going to get that? Nate smiles gleefully. No one. That's why I did it. Josh punches him on the arm. Not cool, bro. Okay, unlike Mr. Maltodextrin, I have a contest that someone can actually win for one of these cookies that my sister made. He holds up a plastic baggie with 3 huge M&M cookies in it. He pulls out his phone. Okay, I'm gonna play a song from a Broadway musical. Whoever guesses correctly first wins. You are kidding, right? No, come on, we need a little culture. He scrolls through his phone for a minute. Okay, got it, here goes. It starts playing. The guys kind of roll their eyes like they're never gonna get it. Then Hunter shouts out, "Popular from Wicked." Josh hands him the cookie. Well done, dude. How on earth did you know that? Hunter is so proud of himself. There's a lot about me that you don't know. Like when you're gonna put Pierce in his place? Yeah, I saw him push you around yesterday. What the hell was that? Hunter's eyes darken, but he keeps his voice light. I think he's jealous of me. Jealous of you? Nate shouts. Of what? Obviously, says Hunter, my knowledge of Broadway show tunes. Everybody laughs. Hunter gets up. That cookie was awesome, but I need more food. Can I get anyone anything? Nah, we're good. Hunter weaves his way to the serving line. School lunches are government subsidized, which means they're free for everyone, but they're not that good. People who can afford it bring their own from home. I've started eating the cafeteria food just to save Temmie a few dollars a day. Coop picks up Hunter's milk carton. It's only half gone. Let's spike it. Josh, pour some of your root beer in here. Hurry before he gets back. Hunter returns with a full plate of beef and noodles. Everyone watches him in silence, the laughter just an inch away from the surface. He looks around. What? Nothing, big guy, just admiring you, smirks Coop. Hunter turns to me and Kiki. What did they do? Kiki smiles. I'm sure if you investigate, you'll get to the root of it. Josh reaches over to high-five her. Nice one. I don't get it, says Hunter. He picks up his milk and takes a big gulp. The laughter explodes all around the table. Emma and her minions glare at us from across the table, the cafeteria. Hunter swallows, then cries out in agony, oh my God, that was so gross. You guys know I can't stand root beer. But he's laughing too. Luna and Kiki, you gotta protect my stuff from these jerks. Okay, so that's probably enough.
So, it's good. Yeah, thank you. So, Sean is a former English teacher and librarian and has worked with teenagers for decades in her various ministries. And as she said, she test drove the book with our youngest and some of his friends, which was a delight for her. And in that book, that exploration of friendships, whether they be multi-generational or intergenerational, whether they be primarily among adolescents, but in some cases platonic relationships among 2 different genders, or in other cases just among boys. There are a lot of things that get teased out, and I wanted to mention 2 of them, and one of which is simply going back to that issue of time, the time that's needed to develop those friendships. As someone who is a veteran of many years of youth ministry at a variety of churches, sometimes parents will say, well, I've really been encouraging Whittier to go, but he doesn't know anybody. And then the unspoken thing is, he's not going to go because he doesn't know anybody, but we know the drill. If you don't come, you don't know anybody. And so it's self-perpetuating. Now we know that everybody, when they arrive somewhere, wants to be noticed, named, and known. It's a pretty basic human need. That's part of what our friends provide for us. They notice us, they say our names, and they let us know that they know us. But to get that at youth group, number one, you need small group leaders. I'll talk about that. But you need kids to come and be together and know each other. And for those of us who are veterans of youth ministry, One of the things that we do is we know, number one, if you can, to have a lock-in early in the program year. Because if kids spend somewhere between 12 and 18 hours together, I can do the math, that's 12 to 18 Sunday nights that's made up in one weekend. And then somewhere in the year, you do at least one retreat where you might have more like 36 to 48 hours together. That's halfway from being an acquaintance to being a good friend. Right? And then you do things like mission trips or journeys up to Montreat for a youth conference. Well, you can do the math on 6 days times 24 hours. You're almost all the way to being a close, intimate friend. Now, not everybody at youth group is going to be a close and intimate friend, but you certainly create more of the possibility than if you don't do those things. So if you're a parent of a child who's sometime soon going to be up in our youth ministry area in particular, chances are they've not had a lot of time with their church friends that's unbroken. An hour on a Sunday, maybe an hour on a Wednesday, but has there been a spring break, and have you come the last couple weeks? Life gets busy. But when they start getting up the youth group and their opportunities for retreats and lock-ins and mission trips, if you want your student to have close friendships at church, youth ministry provides an opportunity that's different than just about anywhere our children are going to be. And it's made a difference in the lives of the Henry children, I know. And what's beautiful about the relationships that I see, because I'm a youth group leader on Sunday nights here, is that on any given Sunday night, in our 11th and 12th grade youth group, we might average about 16 to 17 kids in that group. We might have 9 different high schools, if not 10, among those 16 to 17 kids. But which is a challenge, but the beautiful thing is that maybe you've had a bad week at Mooresville High School, and maybe people think they know who you are, and it's not accurate. Maybe Cannon's been really rough that week. Maybe Huff, you feel like it's just too impersonal, it's too big. But you come to youth group, and nobody knows your Mooresville High School story. Nobody thinks they know all about you because they've been with you since 2nd grade at Cannon. You're a kid who comes to church and invests with other kids and are fed by them. There's something wonderful for the children who come. So I want to throw that out there about youth group. The other thing I want to mention is this. Research is really clear, and I'm stretching the word friend just to let you know. But we can have intergenerational friends, and I would argue that Whittier Henry, an 18-year-old high school senior, would consider Tyler Ross, a Coast Guard reservist, former United States Marine, elder at our church. He would consider Tyler Ross to be his friend, right? And when it comes to intergenerational friendships, the research about adolescents and adults in their lives is that adolescents who have a strong adult presence besides their parents, no knock on us, there's less risk-taking behavior, higher self-esteem, more motivation to succeed in school and other activities, positive employment outcomes later in life, and improved physical and mental health, all from having relationships with adults who are invested in them. Some studies indicate that for youth who have 3 to 5 adults in their lives who aren't their parents, who are invested in them, that they are more likely to be what they call vital and healthy and whole adults, adolescents and into adulthood. So I'm going to circle back to church for a minute. If you have a teenager who comes and helps with Sunday school, they know Margie Utley, who asks every week, "How are you doing? So good to see you," right? And then they come to youth group, where in the 11th and 12th grade youth group, they've got Tyler Ross, Rebecca, so we've got Margie, Tyler, Rebecca Slay, Megan Leeper, Peter Henry, all who know them, name them, notice them when they arrive, ask them how they're doing. They've got, in former times, Matt Wiggins, as well as the small group leaders. You get the picture. Church is one of those places where our kids can have a variety of relationships that can be a part of them being healthy, to the extent that we can ever talk about the things that push them towards healthiness and wholeness. So I want to pause there, and I've given a variety of stats. Sean and I have tried to flesh out some of the things regarding friendship. And certainly when, in Sean's story, when they're talking about transactional friendship, I've set it up a little bit in terms of what we get from friendship. But of course, there's the flip side. By being present, by being friends to others, we're aiding their emotional health, psychological health, spiritual health, physical health. We are part of them being all that God has created them to be in the same way that they are for us. So it truly is something that can be mutually beneficial and part of God's call for us in the kinds of relationships that we're called to. So Sean and I agreed that we'd wrap up right around 10:30 and that I would take any sort of questions, answers, observations. And I've already alluded to the fact that, some people are abstaining from things like chocolate during Lent. Here at DCPC, we're abstaining from being fully staffed. So I'm wearing a few different hats, and that means probably I talked too fast and threw too much at you as I tried to calm down in the first 15 minutes, and I apologize. But we're going to wrap up right about 10:40 so I can go back over, put on a robe, and make sure I'm ready for 11 o'clock worship. But before that, questions, observations, your own reflections? Yeah, Haley. Yeah, I will repeat the question. Yep, for the people online, for Emmy and Jerry Hancock at least. I know you're watching. Yeah, Haley.
I'm curious, like thinking about the idea of like contact hours and friendship. I mean, it's clear that we spend a lot of time with our families. Does any of your research show like the family friendship scenario? Like I would say
Yeah.
friendship with a father or friendship with a sibling. Does that any of your research
Yeah.
flesh that out?
So two things. Number one, I had a good friend at a former church. One of her favorite phrases was, "I've already said more than I know." And so I want to make sure I don't say more than I actually know. And I don't know if you saw me cringe when Haley said, "Your research." I'm like, "You mean other people's research?" So I do not have information about family friendships, and I'd be curious for us to ask Catherine. And I would say this. You all in Connections, have you had Catherine come? You all, no offense to the folks in Covenant, but Connections, you're going to have adolescents pretty soon if you don't already. And Catherine would be a wonderful person. She's a member of our church, and she could come in and do some actual dignified and good teaching for you on friendships and adolescence. I would love, we'll tee her up for that. I think for some folks who have the blessing of being near extended family, particularly when we think about cousins, there is something powerful in the relationships among cousins. And I say that as someone who, early in my life, my mom had 10 brothers and sisters. I have 30 first cousins on that side. And about 20 some of us lived in the Kansas City area until I was in second grade. I do remember that being particularly impactful on me, Haley. But as to what research might say about those kinds of friendships, I don't know. But yeah, Graham.
So thank you, Peter, for this. I think it's very timely and important, and it's also coincidental. I was just at a conference at Duke University as part of their new program on pluralism, free inquiry, and belonging.
Yeah.
And the title of the conference was Intellectual Friendship.
Yeah.
And the importance of not only sort of doing leisure-based things, but intellectual friendship. And they had a panelist who was from MIT, a classicist from MIT. And she said how important friendships are among not only those you like and you agree with,
Yeah.
but people you disagree with. And that's actually maybe the most important type of friendship. And then going back to Socrates, there's a greater good to be refuted than to refute.
Yeah.
Greater good to be refuted, and that's what those friendships provide for you. And then we talked about the sort of crisis, the epidemic of loneliness, and a lot of the college professors there were saying this is a problem among all our students across the country. And that trust and honor are really more important than liking and agreeing with one another. That if you can trust that friend, that they're not going to betray you, they're not going to post something about what you just talked about on social media, that they're not going to force you or try to pressure you to do stuff you shouldn't do or you don't want to do. That's the core of real friendship, intellectual or otherwise. My question for you, I'm trying to speak loudly.
Yeah.
My question is, because we didn't get to this, is how do you find trustworthy, honorable friends? Whether it's us, right, as adults, or our kids, who are seeking that, but there's all these perceived and real dangers out there
Yeah.
among friends or perceived friends who aren't honorable.
Yeah. So that question about how to find that trust and honor among the people who may become your friends, right? Yeah. I don't have a ready answer for that. I mean, I will say this, for those of us who come from a Christian background, it is true that Jesus, when asked, how many times must I forgive? 7 times? 7 times, 70 times, right? Trust will be broken. If you're an adolescent and in a relationship, at some point you're going to hurt your friend. That's adolescence. The question is, have we laid some groundwork for forgiveness and reconciliation when we've broken trust with people, when we haven't fully honored them? We would, of course, aspire and hope that all of our relationships and friendships would never have broken trust and never a moment where we feel dishonored, but it generally happens in human relationships. But what are the tools and resources? What have we done beforehand to lay the groundwork for responding when that happens? And Graham, your question is, I think, one of the things I appreciate about an element you threw in there was some of the consequences, or we should say the public nature of some of that is so heightened now. Back in the day when I said something stupid to Kyle Drury, it wasn't posted anywhere. There wasn't a video of it. Most folks didn't know I was an idiot except for a close group of friends. And then I could circle back to Kyle and say, I don't even know why I said that to you. Like, I'm really sorry. But I didn't have to have I wasn't judged by a wider world who in some ways fed into that. And by the way, that's true for adults too these days. And so, Graham, I obviously am not coming up with a ready answer other than to say for us, certainly laying the groundwork for what we know about our call to one another, and then what it means to use some of those resources to push through the times where trust and honor are broken. And by the way, and I'm going to call him Rachel, Graham also mentioned that epidemic of loneliness that we all hear about. I mean, the need for belonging, and friendship is partly about belonging, and the effects of not having that belonging, are being pretty well documented. And I think about the life of a community of faith. Like, you don't have to be a believer in Jesus to receive the goods and services of a community of faith. And you all probably know this as a Presbyterian, the only 2 things you cannot do if you're not a member is you can't be an officer and you can't vote in a congregational meeting. Everything else we do, everything else we have is a gift from God that we say, here it is. And that includes belonging and friendship. And I think part of the call of the church is to live into that. For a world that's frankly longing for it and needs it. Rachel, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I was wondering if you detected, either in the research you collected or just, comment on this, I guess, if the different quality of the interaction matters rather than just the amount of hours spent with each other. Because I know I've made really close friendships really fast, depending on the context that I know those people. Like a spiritual context where you're going past kind of surface conversation, you're talking more about spiritual life, or on a retreat with strangers, you kind of leave with a lot more, accelerated, deeper friendship. So I wonder if there's any research on that as far as like emotional intimacy and connection with the type of interaction, not just the quality or quantity of hours.
Yeah, I feel like what little I've read is that, that the quantity eventually leads to the quality as well. I think for a lot of us, we know that those first moments, or those first, periods of time, there's small talk, there's get to know you, there's to better understand a bigger story, and then there are opportunities to go deeper. So what little I've read, certainly speaks to the quantity eventually leading to the quality. But as to the kinds of relationships that maybe begin in deeper water for a variety of reasons, like I don't know as much about that. I would note that would be a great question to ask Catherine Bagwell when you get her to come to the connections class. Oh. And Catherine, by the way, wanted to be here, but she and her husband had gone up to Richmond for the A10 women's basketball tournament and weren't able to be back. But I told her I was going to use her name, so she better give me good info so she's not slandered by what I say. Other questions or observations? I feel like I saw another hand. Yeah, Van.
Any suspicion that the mobility aspect of the population is related to your statistics?
Yeah, so Van asked the question about mobility as it relates to some of the stats. I honestly don't know, Van, But I mean, I think probably some of us, we can probably talk about some things that are at least correlational, if not causal. I mean, we're an area that relies on mobility. Do you have a car to get from River Run over to McEverfield, to then eventually get to Dance Davidson? And if you're going to and fro to get your kids to those activities, what time do you, I mean, the mobility and the call for mobility, particularly in suburban areas, is pretty strong, and that erodes some of that opportunity to get together. Is that what you meant, Van?
I was thinking of people moving. You talked about your family all being together, but that doesn't happen frequently. And
Yeah.
you live there.
As the guy who, and as the man and woman, the husband and wife, who together moved their high school children, that issue of being away from family and asking family to change friendships in the middle of high school or just otherwise, I think one could certainly, again, whether it's caught, I mean, there's a lot involved in not being near family, and then in some cases being taken away from friends, to be sure. I feel a little guilty, as you can tell up here. Yeah. Van, the thing I thought you were going to ask me, I mean, I think that one of the, I certainly referenced young families, referenced children and adolescents, but Catherine would say that some of these things regarding friendships are true for adults, whatever our age and stage of life. The need to be noticed, named, and known. Doesn't matter whether you're 88, 8 years old, 18 years old, it's the same. And the need to spend time together, the need to belong, whether we live at the Pines, whether we live on Lorimer Road, wherever, if we're out, in the McConnell neighborhood, those things, it's not a matter of our age, it's a matter of being human. So, yeah. One last, Lacey.
For a person who's moved around a lot, which I have, I've left that really good friend in every place.
Mhm.
Just maybe one person. We keep up,
Yeah.
but it's distance
Mhm.
then. And you do miss that
Yep.
being together.
Yep. Yeah, so Lacey mentions having moved around more than her share in her life as well, and leaving those friends behind and trying to maintain that connection, maybe with that one good friend, but there's difficulty in that. I would also say, as an extra little layer, for some of us, depending upon what our call and ministry in life is, there are extra dynamics too about friendship, for instance, among pastors, with church members, as we move to different locations, that's maybe a little more operative or a little different for us. The other thing that nobody asked about, but I also want to say this, when Van asked about mobility being a factor, some folks also, of course, are going to ask about this being a factor, right? And when we know that the decline in friendship, time with friends, and the quality of some of those having declined, and some of those numbers can get more stark around the year 2007, when the first smartphone, iPhone, came on the market. There's plenty of literature asking the question, what role are our phones playing in our friendships and relationships? But that's a topic for someone who wants to talk about Jonathan Haidt and the anxious generation to talk with you all about at some point in time. Pam Dykstra standing up, my cue to walk across the street and put on a robe. You all were very gracious to let us come and talk today.
It does work.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you. Thank you for your talk of friendship, and thank you for your leadership of this church. And I love where you said this church is a place for friendship at all, no matter what you believe. I just come. That was beautiful. Thank you, Peter.